So I'm the writer Nick Chiles, and I'm dialoguing here with my father, the musician Walter Chiles, and we're talking across the fence. So I'm 51, and it feels like we're currently in a period where there's an incredible amount of racial tension, racial violence. Of course, a lot of it, I guess, because we're seeing these things on videotape. But I'm wondering if you could provide some context for this. You're 83 years old, so you've been seeing interactions, the life of African Americans for much of the 20th century. So, how does the current period and the violence against African Americans, the racial tension, how does it compare to what life was like or what you saw like during the Jim Crow era or the pre-civil rights movement?
Well, ironically, uh, I'm in the process of reading a book called Black Christian Nationalists by Albert Cleage, and he died in 2000, and he in his book talked about what was happening in the black community since he was a boy, and he was close to 100 years old when he died, and so I'm using that book as a reference for my own life, and some of the things that he talked about are the same things that we're talking about today. He talked about the white power struggle against the black power struggle, and all the things that are in the middle between the two groups. And he also talked about what the power struggle of the whites really mean. And he opened my eyes up into a fact that the police, in the case that you're talking about, was originally uh, members of the Ku Klux Klan, and it was their business to make sure that the blacks were never really comfortable,
Right,
to
right.
make sure that there were always something going on to keep them on edge. And a lot of times that had to do with lynchings and a lot of other things that that we know as part of history. So to answer your question, I think the idea that black men and black boys and black girls uh, are very, very much victims, as they were during the time of Albert Cleage, and during my time as a youngster growing up. So to me, things have not changed.
Wow. Um, I know that I have a 24-year-old son, and always in the back of my mind when he leaves the house, there's a certain trepidation, and I just wonder over time, like when you were a boy or when I was a teenager, if you felt the same thing about me leaving the house. Maybe this is something that's kind of always been a part of our history in the community, that when black men went out into the world, that there was some fear attached to it on the part of their families.
Well, I tell you, when you were, I would say, you left the house early 20s, I think, going into going into Texas,
Right.
and we didn't want you to know this, but every day your mother would ask me, "Have you heard from him yet?" And then I would come in and ask her the same thing. "Have
Really?
you heard yet?" And a day wouldn't go by where we would inquiring as to how you're doing, and then we didn't want you to know how we was really being, uh, negatively felt about your moving around and so forth, especially in Texas where you were. So things
I
have
guess
not
when I came
changed.
back home, there was some relief when I moved back to New Jersey.
Yeah, very much so. And that's why I came down there to help you get back home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So things have not changed. And as a matter of fact, it seemed to be getting worse to me.
Wow. When you were a little boy, um, and we've talked about this before, you know, it was Jim Crow in the 1940s. Did you have this sense that when you came across white people, that they were something, an entity to be feared? Was that like something that your parents passed along to you, or was just kind of something that you guys didn't talk about?
We didn't really talk about it in that sense, but they made sure that I didn't stray far from the house, and that when I went out onto the main drag where there were white people, that I always remembered my manners. That was their thing. You know, make sure that you stick to your manners the way you've been taught at home and so forth.
Okay. And the idea was that that would protect you,
Yeah.
even though not necessarily always the case.
No, right. Exactly right.
Right. I mean, we're kind of seeing that now. This idea that if he was only dressed a certain way or wasn't wearing a hoodie, then perhaps these things wouldn't have happened to him. But I guess this is a thought. We're reaching for whatever we can find, some way, some idea that perhaps we can protect our children. And you know, maybe in some of it is a delusion, but we need to have some kind of hope.
Yeah, true. But I think that with the hoodie and so forth in today's world, that is a feeling from these young men of defiance. You know, they know that those hoods put everybody on edge and so forth, but they deliberately wear them just to do that.
Was there anything like that in your time? Defiance?
No.
No? Well, you had jazz music.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Jazz was the hoodie of the day, I guess.
Okay.
You know?
All right, well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. This
Not at all.
was pretty illuminating, so thank
Yeah.
you. I love
Not
you.
at all.
Love you.
Love you too.
All right,
All
thank you.
right.